All right, joining me now, Delaware Democrat Senator Chris Coons. Always great to have you back.
Thank you, Shannon. Great to be on with you this morning.
So while you guys wrangle over the budget, and there were many amendments and fights as this thing went through the night, we also have this against the backdrop of Elon Musk and of DOGE trying to cut what they say is waste in government. And I know that you have strong feelings about that. So I want to play something from Steve Davis. He's one of the executives who have left his family, left his business for a time to do this for free, to come try to root these things out. Here's what he said about why he and these other executives are doing it.
The reason I'm here, which is probably for many, is that I think the goal is incredibly inspiring. I think most of the taxpayers in the country would agree that in order to have the country going bankrupt would be a very bad thing, and therefore the country going not bankrupt is a good thing. That all of us are willing to kind of put our lives on hold in order to do.
He's literally a rocket scientist. He's got a PhD in economics. Why wouldn't we want people like that at the table trying to help?
Well, I have no objection to folks who are bringing their skills and talents to try and strengthen and modernize the federal government. The thing that I've been speaking out against is the way they're being untruthful, frankly lying, about the amount of waste, fraud, and abuse in Social Security. President Trump's own acting Social Security administrator, a man named Lee Dudek, just recently testified that less than 0.1% of all the Social Security payments made are erroneous or false or made in error. And President Trump, when he spoke to Congress, went on at great length about how many people are on the Social Security rolls who are 200 years old, 250 years old. Elon Musk has called Social Security a Ponzi scheme. And the truth is, nobody who is in the Social Security system of an age over 115 gets any payments. And as Lee Dudek said, there are very, very, very few false or erroneous or wasteful payments. And so what I hear from Delawareans about, Shannon, is their alarm about these suggestions that somehow Social Security has to be cut because it's full of waste, fraud, and abuse.
Well, you heard
so
that.
If talented people are coming to help find waste, fraud, and abuse, I'd like them to be honest about where it exists and to work in a bipartisan way to address those issues.
Okay, would you sit down with Elon Musk? We would be happy to broker a conversation. I know that you have real problems with things that you said that haven't been truthful, but do you see, I mean, no one is losing more money doing this than Elon Musk. Would you sit down in a room with him to say, here are my ideas, here's where I think you're getting it wrong, where can we find common ground? Because I know you work across the aisle and have strong friendships across the aisle.
I do. And look, I was proud to join a bipartisan bill this week led by Senator Chuck Grassley and Senator Maria Cantwell. 7 senior Republicans joined this bill to pull back the power to impose tariffs unilaterally. President Trump announced tariffs this week on almost every country on earth, including many with which we have a trade surplus. What my colleague Senator Mullen just said about how President Trump is rebalancing trade and he's going after those that have a trade surplus with us doesn't account for the fact that he's slapping tariffs on every country, including our closest partners and allies. That's going to raise prices for middle Americans. They're going to pay more for fruits and vegetables, gas, cars, furniture, clothing. It's going to make America less affordable, not more affordable, which was a key campaign promise of President Trump's.
And I do want to get back to tariffs, but before we leave DOGE, one more thing there, because you talked about Social Security, and I get what you're saying. We're told millions of people with those, 200 plus aged old people, you're saying they're not getting payments.
But they're not getting payments.
They may be there. So there's another executive who is working to go through this with DOGE as well. And he's put together numbers showing that there are 1.3 million people who are in the country illegally that are receiving some level of Medicaid. If that number holds true, is that a concern to you that you believe we should be cutting?
I'd be happy to look at that and to see what data they have. The other issue that I'm going to push back on my colleague Senator Mullen about is the House budget bill includes $800 billion in Medicaid cuts. And
but again,
so
they say that's not
House
just services. Senate, they say they hope that will be in fraud and waste. But the president and the speaker have committed to not cutting actual benefits for anyone. So fair to say that?
It would be great if they didn't cut benefits. But I don't believe the math works. I don't think you can find $800 billion in just waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicaid and not cut people's benefits.
Okay, so let's go back to tariffs because you were talking about that. There are a number of American industries and businesses who say they're actually happy about what's happening. They know there's going to be short-term pain, but they say they've been throttled by what's been happening with foreign tariffs, including from some of our closest allies. Here are some of those businesses.
The UAW members, and I brought 20 of them with me. They're sitting right over here. We support Donald Trump's policies on tariffs 100%. So, Mr. President, we can't thank you enough.
Our hope here is that the president can use this tool to square up the deck and get us a little bit of a better deal with some of these trading partners so that we're not balancing the backs of these different trade balances on U.S. farmers and ranchers.
Okay, so some auto workers, some farmers, some ranchers. What do you say to them? They think that this is going to actually help them, that they've been at a very unfair disadvantage.
I would say to them that targeted tariffs that are clearly focused on a few countries where we have bad trade practices, deep trade imbalances, can be smart economic policy and can help protect American farmers and ranchers and American manufacturers. That's not what Donald Trump is doing. He's slapping massive tariffs on almost every country in the world, and it's hard to explain or justify some of the tariffs he's imposing. In the coming weeks and months, when millions of Americans see their 401ks dissolve, the stock market lost 10% just in the last 2 days of last week, and when hundreds of millions of Americans pay more for everything that they need for daily living, the groceries that they buy and the food that they put on the table and the cost of housing, I think they're going to be upset. And I think we're going to see long-term, broad economic damage, not for a few targeted industries or companies, but across the entire American landscape.
And if that happens, there may be a midterm price to pay for Republicans. So we will see. But before
Yes,
you go,
there will.
I want to make sure we get you to respond to this. You're a longtime defender of President Biden. You were co-chair of his national campaign. This week, we're learning something coming out in a new book. They have a lot of quotes from former White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain talking about how much the president deteriorated during his term. He was tired, confused, didn't understand the arguments that President Trump was making on issues like inflation, that he was, quote, out of touch. The Daily Beast says this. Klain's new comments suggest that the longtime political advisor and other members of Biden's team were increasingly aware of the president's mental and physical deterioration, even as they continued to project outward appearances of confidence in his abilities. You co-chaired his campaign. Does that include you?
I was shocked at what I saw on the debate stage, the performance President Trump and President Biden had debating each other. I had frankly never seen what that quote suggests about President Biden's abilities. But frankly, Shannon, I haven't taken the time to read whatever's come out about this. I've been very busy this past week. As you mentioned, we stayed up all night Friday night debating and voting against the DOGE cuts, against the Republican budget bill, and speaking out against the tariffs. I'm happy to come back and do a future interview about whatever quotes come out in future books. But right now, I'm focused a lot less on retired private citizen Joe Biden and a lot more on how President Trump's tariffs are going to hurt middle Americans.
Okay. Senator Coons, come back soon. Always appreciate your time.
Thank you.